Good evening, educators. Welcome to day 3 of Workload Tips for Educators. Today is our last day. If you're new to this group and new to mini-series, I try and provide this information within 20 minutes or less. And these are just very helpful tips that we can use as educators, whether you're a paraprofessional, teacher, or principal. These workload tips are for you. As someone who's served in all 3 roles, I did think about that. What are the most effective tips that I could bring you today, as well as throughout this mini series. If you have been here or you missed days 1 and day 2, please go back in the group and you can watch days 1 and 2. So just as a little recap, on day 1, we actually went through a reflection and a prioritize activity. On day 2, we talked a lot about discussed things like automating. What can you automate within your day? Eliminating, using some of this activity, planning, and then bundling tasks as much as possible. So I'm Shyla Webb, education consultant. I've been in the education sector for 22 years now. And as a teacher, I was a special education teacher working primarily with students with emotional behavioral disorders and having caseload as high as 25 at some times. Within the first few years of education and teaching, I learned that I was ill-equipped to handle the multitude of interruptions that were coming at me within a day. And so that's what really got me interested in how can I work smarter, not harder, or I've heard it called intelligent laziness, which I love. And that is, so I'm here to provide some strategies to you. If you are here with me, please feel free to say hi. Hi, Sean. Thanks for watching and being here. If you're catching the replay, just let me know that you're watching the replay. And anytime, if you have any questions or comments, I try and watch the feed as I'm going through this mini series. But after, when I'm done, I will always come back and answer or direct message me at any time as well. Okay, so for today, we're going to talk about the time spent that we spend on typical tasks such as email, communicating, correcting, as well as unexpected events and meetings that happen within a day as an educator. So let's talk about email first. I have a colleague that sends out a letter at the beginning of the year, her welcome back letter, and she lets parents know right away that she checks email during her prep time and at the end of the day. And the researchers or the top performers out there actually suggest that we only check our email anywhere from 2 to 3 times a day. We schedule that in. And anyone that knows me knows that I check usually around 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. and that's it. And I really highly recommend that you do the same. Now, I know that you're probably wondering, well, but parents, that they need to hear from me right away, or students are waiting on me. Well, let them know right up front that this is your boundary. Anyone that needs to contact you right away, what they can do is they can call, or they can even send a message to the office. So that is one thing that I really want you to think about. Think about the relationship that you have with your phone too, and I highly encourage you to turn off all notifications that you have on your phone. Obviously, when a call comes in, that you're going to be alerted there, but everything else can be turned off. I think the research out there right now says that we get over 250 notifications in a one-day time period. Now, this is not over 24 hours. This is actually usually during our wake hours. So think about that. That's probably about 20 interruptions in a day, or in an hour that you're being distracted. Now, I know it seems like, well, when my phone vibrates, it doesn't take me off task, but it really does. Start paying attention. Your brain can't multitask. It can't do 2 things at one time unless it's an automatic habit, such as breathing, blinking, walking, things like that. Otherwise, if you're at your desk concentrating and all of a sudden you get the notification on your phone, it is going to pull you away. And then what happens is we lose efficiency. The other part that happens is it actually adds to our stress levels. So when we see certain text messages come through, emails from a certain parent or anything like that, it activates our stress response system, as I mentioned yesterday, I believe. And so turning off your notifications is a really good, healthy boundary around that. I have a really good, or an example that I have is I was out for a workshop, and this was as in my role as an administrator. After I put my boys down, it was 9 o'clock at night, I opened up my laptop to catch up with my email. And I had received over 100 emails that day. Now, throughout the workshop, I was checking my email and responding to the ones that looked really important to me and needed a response from me right away. But the rest of them, I just let sit. Because typically my response time, I tell people 24 to 48 hours, I aim to get back at you, or get back at you to you. You know what I mean? And so when I was replying to staff, they were replying right back to me. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and I still had a ton of email to answer. The reality is in that 2 hours, because the replies were coming right back, I only got down 21 emails I took care of, and that was it. It was at that moment I realized how connected we truly, truly are. And my own kids' teachers, I had sent her one of them an email, and she had responded back. It was later afternoon. She didn't answer it that day, which was fine. I never followed up. The next morning, she sent me an email just to say, I saw your email. I'll get back to you later today. She had told me that she was in a meeting that morning. So I just thought about that's one extra task that she had put on her plate when it was really unnecessary. The friend that I have that sends out the letter that says she only checks email twice a day and also talks about 24 to 48 hours to get back to her, her life is a lot better and a lot less stressful because when she's out sick, she doesn't have to worry about responding right away because that parameter has been set. So I really encourage you to do that. Think about also when we're doing emails, if what you have to say is longer than a paragraph, I want you to consider just picking up the phone and talking it through. Or even sending, now we have things like Loom, a Chrome extension, free Chrome extension that we can just send a quick video and send our message. That sometimes is a faster, more efficient way to do what we need to do rather than typing it all out. The other part that I want you to think about is when you have something to type, if it is a lot to say or you want to be really careful about how you're going to say that, you can use programs, apps like Grammarly, WordTune, all of that to help you perfect your message or improve your message without having to think about it as much. And so that'll help you be more efficient with emails. Any long emails, what I do is I usually use the voice to text through Google. That way I talk out my emails and then I go through and do the edits and then I just send. I can talk much faster than I can type, and so that's a really good way for me to save time. Okay. The other form of communication, when we get too far into our emails, I want you to think about if you have fallen behind in your emails and you're, let's say, thousands behind, a great way to start over is create a folder that says old emails. Take all of those emails and dump them into that folder. This will clean out your inbox. And I know you're thinking about what about those messages you didn't get back to? The ones that you're currently working on, let's say you're doing something with a parent or having some ongoing communication, you can bring that back into your inbox. But all the other ones, just push aside. That way they'll be there in case you need it, but moving forward, you have some clarity and you've removed all the clutter from your current inbox if you need to start over. Okay, love that strategy that I've learned from a workload tip coach that I've met along the way. So when we think about emails versus phone calls, I know that we don't get on the phone because people can drag out the conversation. So what we can do is we can just let them know at the beginning of the call that we only have 5 minutes to talk. And plan out your message ahead of time, especially if you're calling for something difficult or it's about student behavior. I highly suggest that you really write out your conversation or write out your points that you need to make so that it is made and you are efficient as possible. Now, if someone tends to talk for a long time, again, letting them know that you only have 5 minutes at the beginning of the conversation helps. And as they go over, you want to let them know that you really need to get going. One strategy that I learned from working with a parent that continued to talk, even though I told her I needed to get going, was I would call her 5 minutes before the bell rang. So it was that at the end of my prep time, not at the beginning, so that the beginning of my prep couldn't be consumed by a conversation. This works well with colleagues too. And then that way when the bell rang, I would say I have to get going right before the bell rings. Then the bell rings and you can hear the student shuffle and the students coming in. then that background noise is also a reminder and an indicator that they need to let you go. And you can also use that as a reason you really need to go right now. And that seems to work out very well. If you have a colleague that comes in during your prep time, I really encourage teachers to shut their doors during prep time if you need to. One strategy that works is if you're sitting at your desk, I want you to stand up with some paperwork and you're going to walk out the door and you're going to get moving. That is a really good way to get your colleagues to move on and not give them your entire prep, because that can happen too, and it can easily happen. It's okay occasionally, but right now we need that time, and we need that time more than ever, given all the extensive work that we have to do as it relates to COVID. Okay, so then text messages. Think about text messages. For the most part, they're a huge waste of time. And I know that people find text message convenient. They really are for just sending an FYI. A lot of organizations have switched to Slack so that we can have that direct communication and we don't get lost in a large communication feed of email. So that is great for efficient purposes. But we don't want to use Slack or text messages for additional conversation. And we want to try and solve problems as much as we can on our own, or encourage others to do that before they just pick up the phone or send us an email to get the answer from us. That loses efficiency on both ends and interrupts us. We've really become a society that we're so dependent on the answer being given to us as well. So if you're a leader, think about that when you're being contacted a lot more from your educators or the people that you lead. They want the answer right away, but they have the answer in front of them. They just haven't searched that out on their own. So that's a strategy I want you to think about, and to help reduce the number of emails coming into your inbox every day. Hi, Stacy. Thanks for joining me. Again, if you're here, say hi. Otherwise, let me know if you're catching the replay. Okay. So then I also want you to think about the common interruptions that you have throughout a day, throughout a week, or the people that are filling up your inbox. So for instance, I have had parents that tend to be, well, let's just say they need a little bit of extra time and care. And so when they do, they send me long emails, and it goes on and on and on. And actually, sometimes they're so long, you're like, where do I begin? How do I sort through this? It also takes a long time to process through everything and respond back. I've had some parents on a regular basis that they start sending this, and they'll start sending it to me, to the administration, to the other teachers, and they don't communicate with everyone. So what you want to do in this case is find one point person. That's the main person that's going to do communicating on behalf of this situation, this higher need situation. They will go and gather all the information from the stakeholders, the many stakeholders involved, and they will include them on the email. So that is one great way to keep everyone in the loop. The other thing that you can do, I say, if they take more than 30 minutes of your time every week, I highly encourage you to just schedule a meeting. And I know, hear me out. Schedule a meeting with this parent automatically every week for 30 minutes. Invite them to come in and work with the team. And I'm going to talk more about that when I do the mini series on how to resolve conflict with parents. But just invite them in automatically. Here's what happens. They quit communicating with you less and less. And they actually stop attending the meeting. In pretty much every situation where we've had that, where we come together around the table, we talk about the issues, we give them that time, we give them their stage, the situation diffuses greatly by that. And I don't know if it's just that they feel heard more, or if it is bringing everyone around the table. We're all hearing the same message, we can ask questions. That 30 minutes of time that we automatically schedule saves time on the back end from when you have to go and connect with multiple people to find out their perspective or their situation of the same conversation that this parent might be having. The same thing that can happen with your colleagues. If your colleagues are going from person to person and all these mixed messages are being sent, just come together and call a meeting. I know it sounds like common sense, but in times of higher stress, we forget about these simple tips and tricks. So I wanted to mention it again. Okay, so The next part I want to talk to you about is correcting. I want you to think about ways to be more efficient, such as using online assessments where you can, or even Google Forms to do some automatic scoring. There is an option to do like a survey through Google on Google Forms. That is a great way to get some data from students without you having to go through paper and correcting. I also want to mention that not everything that you assign has to be corrected. And I know that can be a big shift for some people, particularly more senior teachers. That was the way that we did it. 20 years ago, we corrected everything we were assigned. Well, the new research that's out there and the information that's out there through response to intervention is we can take one or two problems of that subset of questions. So let's say math is a really easy one where I think a lot of questions or a lot of math problems are grouped based on a standard. When we look at a math book, they're usually chunked together. So you can take two of those problems, random problems. So let's say you're going to correct 3 and 5, and on every student's work, you can correct problems 3 and 5 and not correct the rest. That's a really good way to save time. Another teacher that I worked with had learned about the evidence of student growth when having students correct their own work by explaining how they solved that problem. And so what she did was she carved out time. She thought, well, I'll just try it. And she carved out a good chunk of time out of her math class to have students come up front. They were randomly called to come up front and demonstrate how they solved that problem. So here's what happened in the long run. She no longer had math assignments, every math assignment or problem to correct. These students came up and demonstrated how they solved the problem. Their growth rate was exponential. It really showed on district and state tests. When her class went and took that math test of the standards, their growth was much higher than predicted based on how they had grown in the past, each student's growth trend, as well as her common class growth trend, right? When we look past at past patterns. Sorry. The other unintended consequence that came of this, and a positive consequence, I should say, was that these students became more comfortable with public speaking and getting up in front of their class and communicating. So a lot of great things came from that. So remember yesterday I talked about the return on investment. So think about if what you're doing, what's the return on investment? In that case, the 15-20 minutes that she carved out of her math time, the return on an investment was really something to speak highly of and completely unpredicted. So it was a well worth it to change. And those are the things that we want to reflect on. Okay, so you don't need to correct everything. And hopefully this will now get you thinking about what you are correcting and what you don't need to correct as well. Next thing I want to talk about is unexpected events. So we have some common unexpected events that occur on a regular basis. So as a teacher of students with emotional behavioral disorders, it was common for me to have students be sent to my classroom to problem solve because they were struggling in the regular education classroom. Well, I was also trying to teach math and reading and other subjects while this was happening. And so what I did was I created a system of when a kid came to my room, they had a very clearly defined system of what they needed to follow, and they had to actually fill out a problem solving sheet, state out why they're there, why they think the problem happened, and the perspective of the teacher or whoever it was that sent them to me to problem solve. So while they were waiting for me, they were doing their own reflection. They got to write it out. You can have them type it out nowadays on a Google form, any of that. And then what that did was it stood as a data collector for me as well. It got them to already process through the situation before I even got to them to talk through it. It got them to calm down because they got to write it out, and they got to write it out however they wanted. So they could say the teacher was a jerk. Now we dove down and dug underneath the layers and got to the real problem of the behavior, but they got to get that out, and that was super powerful. The other part is then I didn't have to do extra work for the data collection. It just went into their file, and I could keep track of the situation. I could keep track of the results as well. Now, what do we do with students that won't write or things like that? You can add a typing option. You can have them speak it out. A lot of us have iPads now. They just hit the voice record and they talk it out. So there are many various versions that you can do. And teachers, whether you're elementary level, high school level, this type of strategy works very, very well. And I want you to consider putting those things in place. The very last thing, the suggestion that I have for you is for meetings. Come prepared to meetings. If you are facilitating meetings, set an agenda. Be succinct with your message as well. And if you're coming and being a participant in a meeting, be succinct. Stick to the agenda and use strategies such as norms for the meeting. And if you want further training on the meetings and more efficient and effective meetings, particularly even IEP meetings, feel free to contact me and I can help you. We can get that set up. So that's what I have for you today. Think about your emails, the way you're communicating, more efficient ways of communication, cutting that down as well. Clear out the clutter of your email. Oh, I did forget to mention, when you go through your email, as you read each email, the rule is you either do the email, you delegate the task, like forward it on, or you delete it or file it. So think about that. Do, delegate, delete, or file as you go through email. And that's a really efficient way to keep up with your emails that come in. Okay, correcting, reduce correcting as much as possible when you can and as much as you can. Unexpected events, get some systems in place for that so they don't derail your entire day or class period, as well as meetings. Be more succinct and reduce the time in which you spend in meetings, particularly if you're facilitating it. You have a lot of control over that. Okay, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. If you want to talk more or set up training, feel free to visit my website. It's at innermatter.net. So it's INNERMATTER.net. And I can even put it in the link of the chats. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you're all well and staying safe, and we'll see you soon.